The truth of the matter is that my usual stubbornness meant that I'd actually sort of decided not to go for the scan because I was due to go down to London to do some judging at a national award. And both my partner and my business director partner said to me, "Are you mad? There's something, go and get this done, mate."
Yeah.
And had I not done that, I wouldn't be alive today. So I'm glad I listened for once in my life. And it was extraordinary. And the speed and the pace of the journey from, right, you've got to go now, to going through the processes left me no time to think about it. I remember very vividly, just before I went under the anaesthetic, they said to me, count to 10. And somebody had said to me, this could be the last thing you ever do. So make damn sure, you come back. Right. So as I was going from 10, 9, I kept thinking, I refuse to let this be my last sentence on this earth. I've got more to say. And fortunately for me, a few hours later, I woke up, the surgery complete, and she'd done a brilliant job.
Hello, my name's Simon Tomlinson and welcome to episode 6 of Your Tagline Here. If this is your first time here, then please do consider subscribing and share this with your friends who might enjoy it too. If you have any questions, comments, or would like to be a guest on the show yourself, then send us an email to hello@yourtaglinehere. This episode is sponsored by KickLab, which is a digital marketing company based in Birmingham in the UK. KickLab have over 15 years experience specialising in branding, websites, search engine optimization, paid advertising, social media and more. So if you want to grow your business online, just head over to kicklab.com, which is KIKLAB.com. Today is a very special episode because we are joined by an incredible man called Austin Birks. Austin was originally diagnosed with stage 4 bowel cancer in 2018 and had an emergency life-saving operation which removed a tumour the size of a fist, fitted him with a stoma bag, and he subsequently had 13 doses of chemotherapy. Against the odds, he managed to beat the cancer and was given the all clear from his doctors. However, the cancer came back again, not once, but twice. He had another operation in April 2020 amid the outbreak of COVID, and he's currently going through another course of chemotherapy as we speak. I know Austin personally, and I'm regularly blown away by his positive attitude and his ability to never give in, which is truly inspiring. He's a karate sensei at the Enso Shotokan Karate Club in the West Midlands and the author of a very insightful, emotional and entertaining blog and YouTube channel called The Bag for Life, which I highly recommend checking out. He's here today to talk about his experience of fighting cancer, so I'd like to give a very warm welcome to Austin Birks.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Simon.
Hello, Austin.
Hello, good to see you. Good to see you.
Welcome to the show. It's lovely to have you here.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, and I feel very honoured actually to be able to interview you and find out about your story.
Well, conversely, I'm very grateful for the chance to maybe share my experiences with you and anybody else who also might go through the experience I've gone through.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that your story is very inspiring for everyone, but especially people who might be going through a similar thing. So I'd like to go back to the beginning if we can. And how was it that the cancer was actually found and discovered and diagnosed in the first place?
Well, interesting story. So I can almost to the day pinpoint the change in what I can describe as bowel movements, which was January the 1st, 2018. Best way to describe it, I'd always been a very regular kind of chap in the best sense of the word. And from that date on, I noticed there was a marked change in my bowel movements without being too crude about it. That got consistently worse over a short period of time. So I went to see my GP and explained the situation to him. And the truth is, I'd never been ill before, and I had no relationship with the guy because I never saw him. And he just said to me, well, it's your age, you're at that stage now where really it's irritable bowel syndrome. Go to Morrison's chemist and get yourself some tablets. Off you go. So I did, and it made no difference whatsoever. So long story short, I went back 3 times and each time got misdiagnosed. So after approximately 7 or 8 months of getting decidedly more ill, losing weight, feeling terrible, And also very many people saying to me, your physical changes manifest, there's something wrong with you, sort yourself out. I then took advice from my partner and business director and went private to Nuffield Health and had a CT scan. And it was only because of that, and purely because of that they found this enormous tumour, which hadn't been diagnosed before. And then quite literally, I had a phone call from the doctor who did the test, who was actually on holiday at the time, and actually rang me up to say, I've just had a call from the guy seeing your results, and you're in serious trouble. We've got a lady waiting for you. She's the best surgeon we've got at Warwick Hospital. You need to go right away, like now. So that was it.
Wow.
Off I went. And literally, I was just chucked head first into the whole journey from 0 to 60. And remarkable though it was, having said that, my experiences were phenomenally fantastic. The NHS were absolutely brilliant, as I have been to this day since.
Well, that's an incredible story in itself, that you were seen 3 times by doctors and they all told you that it was nothing to worry about. And it's lucky, and well, not just lucky, but it's down to your own persistence in actually going private and getting that scan. And if it wasn't for that, then who knows what would have happened.
Well, the truth of the matter is that my usual stubbornness meant that I'd actually sort of decided not to go for the scan, because I was due to go down to London to do some judging at a national award. And both my partner and my business director partner said to me, are you mad? There's something, go and get this done, mate.
Yeah.
And had I not done that, I wouldn't be alive today. So I'm glad I listened for once in my life. And it was extraordinary. And the speed and the pace of the journey from, right, you've got to go now, to going through the processes left me no time to think about it.
Which I guess is a good thing in many ways, because at least you didn't have days or weeks or months worrying about what was going to happen.
Absolutely.
So how long was it from getting that phone call to actually going into surgery? A matter of hours?
It was. So we went in literally within the hour. And because of my circumstances, I couldn't operate straight away, because there was a complication which involved a great backlog of, frankly, diarrhea, if I'm being perfectly honest about it.
Okay.
Which meant they couldn't actually do anything to stabilise me, which meant 48 hours in isolation, which was fine. And then the surgeon came in, who was a wonderful woman. And she said, you've got to have a stoma bag. I said, great. I have no idea what that means. So she said, well, it means basically we're going to open your bladder and you can't use your rear passage for the purpose it's intended anymore. Therefore, we're going to pull your bowel through, and that'll become your waste disposal unit. Okay. Where do you want it, Gov? Kind of thing, you know. So I sort of said, well, what are my choices, left or right? So we went on the right. Okay. And that was it. So then we went into surgery. I remember very vividly, just before I went under the anaesthetic, they said to me, count to 10. And somebody had said to me, this could be the last thing you ever do. So make damn sure, you come back. Fine. So as I was going from 10, 9, I kept thinking, I refuse to let this be my last sentence on this earth. I've got more to say. And fortunately for me, a few hours later, I woke up, the surgery had been complete, and she'd done a brilliant job.
Wow. So I want to find out more about the stoma bag. But before we do that, I just want to go back a little bit to when you actually got that phone call from the doctor saying that you had got cancer.
Yep.
And that you needed to have surgery.
Yep.
What was going through your mind, and what were the emotions that you were feeling?
I smile, I laugh, not because I found it funny at the time. I didn't, only because, in fairness, the information being given before that was completely and utterly wrong. And even though cancer was an option within the process of the diagnosis, I'd been told that apparently it had all sorts of other strange and odd ailments, which had nothing at all to do with the cancer itself. So I was kind of confused, really. So when he said, it's definitely cancer, it's definitely bowel cancer, I was like, okay, fine. At least I now know once and for all definitively what the issue is. And I now know there's a plan to do something about it. Because before that, there was the uncertainty about not knowing what the issue was and not knowing what the actual process of the medication that might save me and keep me going. So all of a sudden, that overflow of information was actually quite palpable and quite powerful for me, because it meant we've got a plan, we've got a problem. Therefore, we know what the solution is. So in that sense, I felt a degree of comfort. I never felt bizarrely scared or fearful of the word cancer. A lot of people I've met have said to me, oh, God, once I hear that word cancer, that's a death sentence. It's all the things that go with it. And actually, it's not. It was 20, 30 years ago. But people like me who had no experience of it, until you're in that world, don't realise precisely just how far, the medical world have progressed, the treatments. And in all fairness, the ratio of success these days is far, far, far higher than it ever has been. I also think that part of that, though, is up to the individual response of the patient.
Yeah.
And I've seen this something time and time again in my treatments, and I've had over 50 chemotherapy treatments now in total.
Really? Wowzers.
Yeah. And in fairness, what you discover is there are certain people who kind of accept their fate and resign themselves to what may happen. There are others who refuse point blank, who say, no, up with this I will not be putting. I ain't going yet. I've got too much to do. And I can count on one hand, well, literally, one hand, people I've met who've been as equally stubborn as me, if that's the right word. One guy in particular, I was in a hospital ward with after my first operation. He was an incredible guy. He was a postman. And he'd had cancer for 7 years, and he was in a lot of distress. And the cancer had gone and come back into different parts of his body. But the guy was a marathon runner. And in between each new dose of cancer, he'd get up and do marathons. And he'd talk about it,
Wow.
and you talk to people like that, and you think, how can you do that? And then you think, well, if he can do it, why can't I do it? And why can't anybody else do it for that matter?
Yeah.
So it's been, for me, the journey didn't have enough time to dwell on the negatives, which is a positive in my circumstance. But since then, I've had plenty of time to dwell on it.
Yeah, and it must. I mean, from knowing you personally, I know how positive that you are about life in general, and how positive that you are about overcoming cancer. And I'm sure that must be such a powerful tool in helping you to get through the last 3 years of having to battle with cancer. But I guess there must be times when you dwell on the negatives as well.
Absolutely. I mean, the thing with cancer is, I've come to realize this, is that you have to treat it like part of your life. It's not an abstract entity. It doesn't live over there in the corner. It's part of it. It's inside you at the end of the day. When you think about the bizarreness of cancer, it's basically your own body, your own DNA turning against you to try and kill you. That's ultimately what it comes down to. And when you consider that, you therefore have to think to yourself, well, it's part of me. Therefore, do you try and work with it to beat it? Or, do you fight it from day one and regard it as a sort of some sort of psychological enemy you've got to kind of go in there and defeat? For me, I just took the view that thought, I'm not prepared to put up with this. I'm not prepared to accept it. I know it's there. I know it's dangerous. I know it's going to try and kill me, and it's tried several times and got quite close.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I've always committed myself to the theory and the resolve that says, I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to give in. And to be honest, Simon, that comes back down to my lifetime of studying martial arts, if I'm perfectly honest. And that has been a core part of my resilience and a core part of my philosophy. And without that, I honestly don't think that the mental strength and the resilience, the psychological strength and resilience, but even more important, the physical strength and resilience, because when you're fighting cancer and the chemotherapy, it's a tough gig. It beats you up. You're stuffing your body full of seriously bad chemicals.
Yeah.
And in order to sort of cope with that and deal with it, and then go beyond that and still teach karate on a regular basis and still train and still try and give yourself goals and achieve those goals is a completely different mindset.
Yeah, and that's incredible in itself. Like, let's just make it clear with the viewers and the listeners that you're a karate sensei, which means that you lead other people to teach you. So you teach other people karate. You're a black belt, and is it 6th Dan?
Yes, correct.
You got your 6th Dan fairly recently, didn't you?
I did, yeah.
So that's a really high level that you've got to. And throughout this experience of having cancer, throughout having chemotherapy, you've still maintained that teaching schedule to other people, which is incredible.
Well, to be honest with you, it's a strange one, because I used the cancer and all that went with it as a motivation. I'll give you an example of that. I've trained in martial arts for 50 years now. I've done karate for 46 or 47 years. And it's been fantastic. It's taken me all over the world. I've done this, I've done that, done the other. However, when this arrived, when I realised I was a cancer patient, I thought to myself, well, you can either kind of, oh dear, poor is me, blah, 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 all that. Or you can say, well, actually, so what? So what?
Yeah.
What does it mean? So I decided to use the opportunity. So I was offered an honorary grade of a 6th Dan, which after all the years of training is something which I could have accepted. And I said no. I said to the guys who ran the organisation, 2 great guys, I don't want to do that, thank you. I would like to do a physical examination and prove to myself that cancer, chemo, COVID makes no difference. I want to do it and prove to you. And it took some convincing, to be fair. They were like, are you mad? I mean, why would you do that? And I said, because I want to make the point it's not just about me, it's about people who are going through what I'm going through as well. That why should you restrict your goals? Why should you not achieve whatever it is you want to achieve in life? So God bless them, Pete Manning and Joe Ellis, senseis, they put together a training syllabus for me, and I trained in that every day, converted my garden into a dojo, as we call it. I actually, with my partner, we actually hired out the village hall where we could, with the COVID regulations, to actually practice the actual grading examination. Trained hard for a year, did all sorts of physical exercise as well, and eventually on September the 26th went down to Wiltshire during the COVID break, as it were, and had a senior black belt course, and then did a grading in front of a 5-man panel by myself, and was fortunate enough to pass, and thank the Lord I did, because I'm not sure I could do it twice.
Well, yeah, that's excellent, and I think it's really brave and really commendable of you to not accept that honorary 6th Dan and actually say, no, I'm going to do it. Like everyone else, so fair play to you for that. With karate, you've talked about how it gives you physical fitness and physical strength, which I'm sure is a really important part of overcoming any kind of illness, and especially cancer.
Yeah.
What is it about karate that gives you mental strength as well?
Great question. So it's very hard to explain really to people who've not been in that kind of martial arts world, but the simple explanation is that it gives you the capability to test yourself to your utmost and then to test you more. So it will find out if you've got more inside you than you realised you had. Okay. So when you train physically after all these years, yes, you get to a point of physicality, as it were, where you get to the extreme. But then, you never give up, you never give in. The old concept of the samurai warriors, get knocked down 7 times, get back up 8. Okay. And it's precisely the same in karate. And karate is split into 3 sections, what they call Kihon, basic techniques, kata, which looks a bit like a dance to watch, and the third is what they call kumite, which is the fighting side of it. And kumite is really about overcoming yourself. So if you find somebody better than you and you're being beaten, you don't give up, you don't give in. And I think the other key thing for me was I was influenced by 2 very, very amazing people. My own instructor for 31 years was a remarkable man, a man called Cyril Cummings, who died at the age of 79 from bowel cancer. Same as myself. Wow. He was an 8th Dan, and he lived by the mantra of never give up, never give in. An extraordinary character. To meet him in the street, you'd never think this small little polite Irishman was the absolute warrior and samurai that he actually was when he put a karate suit on and transformed into something different. And his instructor was a very famous Japanese instructor called Sensei Kenisuke Noda, 9th Dan, who also died of bowel cancer. So I found myself in this extraordinary triangle, and I refused to be, the end of the hat trick. and I took the view that they'd given their life in pursuit and dedication of the martial arts and taught tens of thousands of people all over the world and bettered their lives. And I thought, well, if I can just get one person, to not give up training maybe, or to even take it up on the back of that, then that's one person, which is a bonus as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. I didn't know any of that. Well, I know that you do karate, obviously, but I didn't know the history behind it.
To be honest, it's quite remarkable because I did my second Dan back in 2003, just before Sensei Noida passed away. And I remember him saying to me in the changing rooms with Sensei Cummings as well, he said, I have very bad pain in my stomach, very bad. I'm going to Japan. And he went back to Japan, and within 3 weeks, he passed away.
Oh, no.
As Sensei Cummings, he was showed his classic Irish fighting spirit, and he hung in there for quite a long time. Okay. But eventually, at the age of 79, he had a great life and a good innings, and was a remarkable character, well loved still to this day. But that was kind of the chapter that ended his world. And in many ways, knowing what they both went through and knowing them as I did, it kind of gave me that extra resolve to say I refuse to be part of that journey yet. Yeah, well, it shows that karate has had such a big influence on your life, but absolutely in your ability to be able to beat cancer in lots of different ways. I just want to come back now to your experience after the operation that you had, finding out that you had a stoma bag fitted. Can you explain briefly what a stoma bag is, because there may be people watching who don't know what it is? Of course. So basically, when should we say that the rear passage, for the purpose the good Lord intended, is no longer capable of delivering the necessaries, then the surgeons in the past came up with this miraculous idea to basically just pull your bowel out effectively and use that as a means of waste disposal. So effectively, it's a little piece of your bladder that hangs out your skin. And what you have to do is you have to learn to nurture it and love it and accept it as part of you, and you have to manage it. and it does require management. It does require TLC, because people have the view, and there are two extremes on this, and I've come across both. One is people have been mortified and absolutely repelled by the whole concept of having to deal with this, because you have to deal with it yourself. You have to put a bag on it to make sure it collects the contents. You have to clean it and make sure you're, doing all the right healthy things that you have to do to keep yourself fit and well, which can be tiresome and can be difficult, but it does have upsides, by the way, which I'll come on to later.
Okay.
But at the same time, if you take the view that says, I can't live with this, it becomes a remarkably difficult psychological battle.
Okay.
I took the view from day one, it's keeping me alive. That's number one. Number two, it doesn't mean I have to queue to go to public lavatories anymore. None of that nonsense. I've got my own key should I wish to use disabled toilets, which I never have. And it also means you have a lot more flexibility. So dare I say, you can achieve what Mother Nature intended while driving on a bus and no one knows anything about it. So there's none of the sort of antisocial sort of stigma that goes with that kind of thing. But there are serious downsides, and there are occasions when it can misbehave itself, and there are occasions when you have awful sort of reactions, and you can have terrible things can happen. You have to be prepared and ready for that. So you need to make sure you've always got the bags and the necessary equipment upon your person, because I recently had an experience to my mortification where I didn't have that preparation. I got caught out, and it taught me a severe lesson, let me tell you, my friend.
Is this a story about the supermarket?
It is.
Okay, so let's hear about it, because the reason I know about this story is because I read it on your blog, and there's lots of other stories on there. So if anyone's interested, go to thebagforlife.com, or is it .co.uk? Thebagforlife.co.uk. We'll leave the link below, but now we'll get the live version from Austin. So yeah, please tell us about this embarrassing experience you had.
Okay, Simon, so it was a Saturday afternoon. I'd been to the gym and been working out. I felt great, and had my tracky bottoms on, had the bag on, everything was good. Thought pop to Morrison's, my store of choice, because it's next to the gym. My shopping list ready, and it was a boiling hot day. I hadn't got my coat, and my coat usually have everything I need just in case. So cut a long story short, I was meandering around Morrison's with my shopping basket, as you do, picking up my bits and bobs. And all of a sudden, I had this rather strange, rather cold, calculating feeling of dread that only comes with a bit of Stoma Bag experience. And I put my hand under my T-shirt and I realised the bag had gone. But unfortunately, the contents of the bag hadn't, which meant I had unfortunately got, dare I say, poo on my hand.
Oh, no.
And I had nowhere and no means of dealing with it. And even worse than that, in my panic, I accidentally put more of the same material on my other hand, and by mistake picked up several items from the shopping basket, not realising I'd now infected them as well. And I thought, oh dear Lord above, what on earth am I going to do here? Because I can either run out the store screaming, obviously, option number one, don't draw attention to yourself, Birks. Option number two, try and be calm and collected and try and find a solution. So I collected my thoughts, thought, right, I need to go and get material and equipment. So I managed to sort myself out without there being any unpleasant consequences for anybody else involved. And the joy of self-service shopping, of course, in Morrison's is you can kind of don't have to work with other people, such as cashiers, who therefore didn't have to get anywhere near to my circumstance. And I managed, therefore, by stealth and by luck to get away with it. But do you know what taught me a big lesson?
Okay.
Never, ever take it for granted. Never think, I'll be okay, because it has a mind of its own on occasions, and it will try and catch you out. It's a mischievous devil, so don't give it that opportunity. And it reminded me also of an incident that took place in November of 2020 when I was meeting Princess Anne at a big swanky affair in London at a rather large hotel. And I was presented to her, I've met her several times before, and she said, oh, hello, where are you from? And my Stoma bag basically gave her the description of where I was from on its own. It just repeated this horrendously loud noise. She looked at me, I looked at her, and the people around and the photographers kind of looked at each other. No one said a word, no one to say really, so I said nothing. But she was magnificent in her understanding of accepting. I think she knew what was going on. But in all fairness to her, she being the professional act that she is, she was stoic and majestic towards the end.
Yeah. So what I like about the stories that you tell and the way that you tell them is that you're not embarrassed about your Stoma bag. You're not trying to hide the fact. I mean, well, you do keep it underneath your clothes, but I could imagine that for a lot of people, it is something that they don't like to share to people.
Oh, absolutely.
And I'm sure that there is a big stigma and taboo. So I think the fact that you're so open about it, that you're happy to tell these embarrassing stories on a podcast like this, and that you have your own blog where you're sharing your stories. And I think it's great that you're helping to make it easier for other people to live with a stoma bag.
Well, thank you. I mean, the logic behind the website, first of all, came from my wonderful partner Yvonne, who sort of said, "You should be doing something with this. This is interesting stuff, and it's not bad stuff." So the first blog we wrote was called "Any Port in a Stoma," I think it was actually. Sorry, and it was about the whole idea of living with the stoma bag. And I remember shortly after I got it, I was in hospital, and there was one night as is the case in hospital wards, ships in the night. This young lad came in. And neither of us could sleep. It was probably about 10, 11 o'clock. The others were all sleeping away. And he said to me, I'm appalled at the fact that at the age of 23, I'm never going to get a girlfriend because who's going to come near me with this? And I said, whoa, hang on. I said, look, people don't judge you on what you've got hanging out of your tummy. They judge you on your personality. I said, they judge you on who you are and what you are. And he said, well, I said, how do you meet girls? He said, Match.com and plenty of fish and all this. He said to me, how do you meet girls? I said, well, back in the day, it was barn dances, quite frankly, and do-si-doing and stuff like that. And so we had this conversation. I sort of said to him, why don't we set up a sort of a, stoma bag meets Tinder kind of thing called a Stomda. So basically, anybody with a stoma bag can meet somebody else's stoma bag. Therefore, you've gone through you all know what the equalities are. You all know what the limitations are. Could be a means of bonding for people. Well, he kind of liked the idea, but he disappeared the next day, never to be seen again. So I never quite found out. But I think in terms of sort of acceptance, that's the hardest thing people have to do and deal with, is this whole thing about change. But life is always about change. That it's always about reevaluating what you do and adjusting accordingly. And it could be cancer, it could be COVID, it could be anything that people have in this awful time we live in. But the reality is, it's how you deal with it. It's what your approach is. It's what your strength is going to be. If you give up, if you give in, guess what's going to happen? And I've seen it happen. I've seen people literally 2 or 3 times in the chemo ward, and where's so-and-so? Well, sorry, they didn't make it.
Oh, right.
And that's how tough it is. And bowel cancer is particularly bad because it's more elderly people. Excuse me. So people in their 70s and 80s. I'm 61. So basically, those guys who've gone through a good life in many cases and sort of think, well, actually, I've talked to people about it before, had some frank discussions about living with dying and the acceptance of death. And that's something else which I think is also an important part of this. You cannot negate the two. Cancer kills a lot of people, and it's there. That's what it's designed to try and do, is to get you. And I've come to terms in my own head about how that works and what that means. And I just take the view that, it's from the film Gladiator, the classic scene with Russell, what's his face, Crowe, and his mate keeps saying, it's your turn, but not yet. And I keep taking that same view, it's not my turn, not yet. And I'm going to keep putting that turn off as long as I humanly can. I've got a lot of things to do. And it's quite ironic because in October 2019, my oncologist said to me, do you want to know your prognosis when cancer came back a second time? Excuse me, I made the mistake of saying yes. And he said, well, you've got a 25% chance of lasting 2 years.
Wow.
Boom. I mean, straight between the eyes, I mean, it's quite funny because when they tell you this stuff, he goes, we'll call it a quiet room. There's a box of tissues waiting. They're not for him, by the way. They're for you,
Yeah.
And ironically, I didn't find myself getting emotional or crying or anything. I just thought, I don't think so. And 2 days later, we went to a wedding. And long story short, there was a woman there who was a gypsy fortune teller.
Okay.
And we had a couple of G&Ts quite late at night and thought, we'll have a go at this. So I walked up to her and she said, do you want to do a hand reading or tarot? I said, do my hand. And she came out with this remarkable stuff. I mean, the first thing she said is, you're ill. And she said, it's either cancer or it's your breathing. I said, it's cancer. And she said, it's come back. I said, yeah. And then she told me all this stuff. And I thought, how on earth can you know this? And then she said to me, do you want to know how old you're going to be before you die? I said, go on then. She said, show me your hand. She'll be 82. I said, I'll take that. Thank you very much. Now, whether or not, it's proven to be the case, but it did give me some degree of comfort. And I thought to myself, she had an excellent kind of TripAdvisor ratings, as far as I was concerned. Her prognosis is far better than what I had to live with. And by the way, still here.
Well, yeah, it's her prognosis is much better than the doctor's. So let's go with hers. Sure. I just want to find out now a little bit more about chemotherapy, because you've mentioned it a couple of times, that you've been through. Well, I know the first time you had, was it 13?
I think it was, yeah.
Do they call them doses of chemotherapy?
Yeah, cycles.
Cycles.
Call it what you like, yeah.
And before you mentioned that you've had 50 in total.
By the time I finish this little lot, it'll be up around there.
So that's a lot, isn't it?
It is.
And can you talk about what it's like to get the chemotherapy and what some of the negative side effects are?
Absolutely.
That you have?
So basically, I mean, it's probably worth explaining that I've had 4 different cycles of chemotherapy. Some are more brutal and more difficult and challenging than others. Some only last 3.5 hours. Let's focus on the present one, which is probably the longest serving one and the toughest one by far. So my cycle is on a Monday I have a blood test. If that's okay, on a Wednesday I report to hospital at 8:30. Then it's either 8.5 hours or 9 hours of solid chemo.
Wow.
What happens there is they strap you into this, I've got a thing in my chest called a port.
Yeah.
And the saline drip, which contains very strong chemicals. There are 4 of those for 2 hours each. And there's an injection which they stick into your arm. And the way they describe the injection, they say, if you've been stung by a bee, I was like, well, I can't remember. It was about 9. And then before you know where you are, bang, it doesn't hurt that much. It's like having molten sort of lava pumped in your arm for about 30 seconds, but then it goes. But after that, what they then do is they strap you up to this, what they call a balloon, which is basically an extremely toxic cocktail. And that drips into this port in your chest for 48 hours. And it's carried in a little bag. And you look like a St. Bernard dog, except it's not brandy, sadly, wish it was. But it's just this toxic stuff. And you get used to it. It's a nuisance. It falls out of bed. It does this, it does that. But again, you just carry on regardless. And then after that, you then have basically extreme steroids, very strong stuff. And then there's 5 days of daily stomach injections where you inject yourself with 40 million units. And I've never worked out what the units are, but it sounds like an awful lot.
Yeah.
And that's designed for my bone marrow, which is actually quite weak.
Okay.
So there's that 2-week cycle. And effectively on the back of that, the side effects are quite noticeable. So briefly, in my case, it results in 2 days of extreme, sometimes 4 days extreme fatigue, nausea, which they gave you really good tablets for, so just be sensible, get rid of those, but you're still, a bit sick. The stoma bag has a side effect. The worst part for me has been this, what I call brittle skin syndrome, where it dries your skin out so badly, you end up looking like you've got constant dandruff, and you've got skin falling off your face, off your arms, off your legs. It's a bit unsightly. It's not very nice. It can be painful. You have a shower, you wipe your face, it bleeds a bit, you get on with it. But even worse than that, what we also get, the side effect of that, is you get in my feet, and a karate instructor, this is a big problem, the feet split the skin. So you get these viscers, and they keep extending, but they give this great super glue. So you can glue them back up again, which is fine. So you just stick them back together and off you go. And to get the same on your digits, I've got plasters on my hands here, simply because on the extremes of your fingers and thumbs, you get these deep cuts, and they're damned annoying because they're in the worst possible places. But again, you take the glue, you put a plaster on, you put a glove on, you work around it. There's always a solution. So whilst in isolation they sound nasty and unpleasant, collectively you can take the view they're awful and ghastly, but actually they keep you alive. And it's all part of the process. And from my point of view, this chemo, tough and brutal though it's been, the good news is that the bigger tumour, which is deep inside my scar tissue, is actually starting to shrink. Which is phenomenal.
So that's amazing.
It is. I mean, I've been there before, and it lulls you into a false sense of security.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, I'll take that any day of the week. And bearing in mind my second surgery, which was cancelled the night before because it right in the middle of COVID, which was pretty horrific. 5.5 hours, and 2 of the fantastic surgeons, to quote one of them, he said, "You've been gutted like a fish," which I thought was a great expression. Thanks very much.
Oh, that was the title of one of your blog articles as well. So I was having a look through some of the articles earlier today.
Right.
So how did COVID affect your cancer treatment that you've been having?
Well, I was remarkably lucky, actually, because when COVID kicked in, I was already in isolation because the cancer prior to the operation had got so bad that I couldn't leave the flat. The reason being that basically cancer of the rectal stomach got so bad, I was bleeding profusely virtually 24 hours a day. And I actually kept a log of how many times I went to the toilet. And the most I went in one day was 63 times.
Wow.
And quite literally, I mean, when I say use the lavatory, what I mean is you don't use it in a normal sense. You just have a constant flow of mucus and blood and other nasty things coming out of you.
Oh, gosh.
I have to say, in terms of my physical speed, Usain Bolt and I think, on an equal par. Because my ability to get from the lounge to the said lavatory was extraordinarily quick.
Okay.
But it was also knackering because you couldn't sleep. As soon as you slept, you had to wake up and go. So I had all that in February and March. Then the actual, I was highly vulnerable, of course. So I was on Mr. Johnson's list. But I used again that time, because I was locked into my flat. I used that time to sort of try and use that as productively as possible. And then the night before the operation, it got cancelled at 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
And the only way I could do it is to have to pay for it privately, which is a whole nightmare in its own because all the banks were shut. There was nothing open. But we managed to get that sorted out, and then spent 6 days in the Priory and came out.
Yeah, and you were so unlucky with that because you were supposed to have the operation on the NHS, but because of COVID, all of the resources were taken up with dealing with COVID,
Absolutely.
which means that you then had to pay a lot of money to do it privately.
I was very blessed, really. My family, my mum especially, the bank of mum at my age came to the rescue, which is fortuitous. But in all fairness, what was odd was when I was in the intensive care unit, there's only me and one other person in there, but they converted that into a COVID unit while we were there. Okay. So I used COVID as a means to develop myself, not only with a karate examination, but also I finished writing a book, which is a book of blogs, got that off to the publishers. Also landscaped my garden. I actually learned how to cook properly for the first time in years because my oncologist said, look, stop eating processed food, did all that kind of stuff. So I used that as a means of generating positives rather than sort of looking at negatives.
Yeah, definitely. And something else that you've done is you've ridden 300 miles on your bike, your exercise bike that you've got in your lounge to raise money and to raise awareness for cancer, which is an amazing thing to do in itself. So you're doing all of the karate stuff and you're riding 300 miles. How did you manage to do that? And was it hard?
Well, yes, it was a simple it was much harder than I thought. It was ironic because, again, my wonderful partner, Yvonne, decided that raising money for cancer research UK would be a great thing. So in 2018, she signed me up to do stand-up comedy at the Glee Club, which I did in front of 450 people, which is an amazing experience. And then when I was away at the gym, again, there's a pattern here, came back and found out I'd been signed up to do 300 miles for the Cancer Research UK cycle ride. So we agreed between the two of us to do it. Had I realised how hard it was going to be, I don't know if I'd have done it, but just to explain, we didn't actually use bicycles that were actually outside of the home. So I've got a static bike and we've got what they call a turbocharger on that. And we used a thing called Swift, which is basically an ability to compete anywhere in the world with anybody else. And it's very, very good. So we used that as the means of doing the mileage. But seriously, it was tough. But we raised 2,000 quid. And the good news is that, again, I went to the gym on a Saturday, recently came back and found out I've been signed up again to do comedy at the Glee Club.
Oh, have you? Oh, I didn't know that.
I'm afraid I have, yeah. So I'm not mentioning any names. But yeah, so I'm going to be back.
Excellent. And when is that going to be?
21st of November.
Okay.
And interesting enough, if people can't sleep, then the first gig I did, which is 5 minutes at the Glee Club, is on the actual Bag for Life video.
Okay.
So if you're having trouble nodding off, that'll send you off. So
well, lovely. And so you'll be busy writing your new material for that.
I've started already, my friend.
Okay.
And it's surprisingly hard, actually, because you have to write everything, present it, and deliver it. And you never know until you get on that stage in front of 450 unknown faces whether or not you're going to be funny or not. And it's a cruel, but it's also, if it goes well, a euphoric experience. Yeah,
I'm sure that it is. So now I want to go into the Bag for Life, because we've mentioned it a few times now. I was having a look through it earlier today and I was really amazed at how many articles there are. There's a lot of them there, which I think is a great way of you sharing your story to other people. I'm sure it must be a really good way for you documenting it, almost like a journal or a diary. What was your inspiration for starting it in the first place?
Easy, really. It was the fact that when I got diagnosed, I looked around to try and find a source of information. And I found lots and lots of medical blogs about people living with cancer. And I found a few blogs of people whose stories were remarkably sad and appeared to be tragic. And I thought, well, that's not really what I want to read, if I'm perfectly honest. So I thought, well, to hell with it, I'll start writing my own. And it was really inspired around the fact that I thought, I'm just going to share the journey, the good, the bad, and the ugly parts of it. And, you know, it was designed originally to be quite light-hearted and to sort of say to people, you can live with it and poke fun at it a wee bit, you know.
Yeah.
But then bit by bit at different times, and again, you mentioned earlier back in the interview, dark side, and there are dark times, don't get me wrong, you know. I've had insomnia for 3 years, so you get a lot of time to think in the early hours of the morning. But that inspired me to write a great deal, because you get the silence, you get your thoughts. And I've been writing blogs for a number of years anyway, so it was kind of an add-on to a previous life. But for me, it was a means, I think, of Catholicism and confessional. I kind of use that as my means of sort of getting it off my chest, for want of a better word, and sometimes I found it extremely useful because I could sort of rant to myself about whatever it was I wanted to rant about, and then all of a sudden I felt I'd sort of purged that negativity. But I would say on average most of the blogs I think are quite upbeat. There are some which I've had a few people say to me, that's quite tough. It's a tough read to have, but you can't sugarcoat this. having cancer is not fun. It's not an easy thing to live with, but you can live with it and you can make the most of it. And dare I say, you can enjoy a life as full and as rich as you want it to be. And I'll say this without any irony. People have said this to me before. They find it quite hard to believe, but since I've been diagnosed with cancer, the richness of my life has actually been fulfilled and expanded rather than reduced. And the reason for that is because this enormous well and outpouring of kindness and affection and love I've got from all over the place, from all sorts of different people all over the world, from different parts and chapters of my life, has been almost hard to put a price on. And it keeps you sustained and it keeps you strong in those dark times. And I've been very blessed with that. And to be honest with you, it's a way of saying thank you to those people and maybe giving those like me who back in the day hadn't got any source of reference to have at least a source of reference. And that was purely where it came from.
And I think that's a wonderful thing to do. And I know from going through the blog articles and seeing the videos as well, that you've put a lot of time and effort into it. And it is a great source of information. And I think the way that you write it is very open and honest. So you can poke fun at it at times, but you are brutally honest about the things that are not nice as well. So it's not like trying to be Pollyanna, is that the right thing?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
You have your rose-tinted glasses on, but it's not all doom and gloom. It's a very honest account, which I think is an excellent thing to do.
Well, thank you. That's very kind of you. And I think, in all fairness, the inspiration of this goes right back to Ivana, in all fairness, and others who've been kind enough to sort of guide me. What's been interesting and on occasions difficult is I get this kind of writer's block where suddenly I can be inspired to write 3 or 4 blogs in the space of a week, then all of a sudden I get 2, 3, 4 weeks where nothing comes into my head. But you know what? At the end of the day, if one person gets one value from it, as far as I'm concerned, I've been very lucky, really. I've had people comment all over the world, who've referred it to relatives who've been diagnosed or people that they know who are scared maybe about having the symptoms. And my message is very clear. If in doubt, don't be like me. Don't be too English. Don't go, okay, GP, you're the man in charge. I'll do what you say. If I'd listened to my conscience, if I'd listened to my girlfriend, who's far less English about it than I was, probably because she's German, to be fair, but in all fairness, if I'd done that, I would never be in the situation I was in. If I'd insisted and been more sort of assertive rather than just, okay, fine, you carry on, then I'd have been in a different situation, but I didn't. So, please don't let anybody else fall into that trap. And
that's great advice to give. So what are the symptoms that people should be looking out for with bowel cancer?
First of all, changing bowel habits.
Okay.
Number one, things that aren't the same.
So when you say changing bowel habits, does that mean you're doing a number 2 more or less?
Basically, what it means is invariably the frequency increases, but dare I say the fluidity also. So from having, without being too crude, but hard stools to suddenly having things that aren't so hard, and all of a sudden detecting blood. That's a key issue. Blood in stools it is literally a red flag. And if you see that, most people go, oh, it'll go away soon. Well, it doesn't go away.
Okay.
And actually, the longer you leave it, the worse it gets. That's the point you need to bang on the door. The other side effect of that are weight loss. My weight disintegrated quite quickly, actually. And I'm still training and doing karate and all that stuff at the same time.
Were you still eating normally?
I was, but I noticed my appetite diminished significantly and my intake got less and less. My energy levels also plummeted. I felt a lot more lethargic, a lot less energized. So there were definite telltale signs. I mean, all the cancer sort of websites tell you the same things anyway. But actually, the first thing is that change in habit. Once you notice a change, that things aren't what they were, don't just ignore it, And then when you start to notice other things beyond that, then that's the time to really, don't take no for an answer. If you're not sure, get a second opinion. If you're not sure if you can afford it, go private. If you're not sure, borrow the money and go private. Reassure yourself. Because trust me, once you leave it too late, and sadly, the harsh reality is that if you make the mistake of going to Dr. Google and all this kind of stuff, which I refuse to do, but if you do, it'll tell you if you've got stage 4 bowel cancer, 20% will make 5 years. That's the average they use. I never took any notice of that because they're using averages of people in their 80s and whatever. And I thought, well, I'm not that person anyway. But actually, again, if you let your mind go down that path, oh dear, then guess what? It builds up and up. Doubt sets in. You can't afford to let that happen. You've got to keep that purpose. You've got to keep that positivity, and you've got to believe in that sort of in your success and in your survival.
Yeah, and I think everything that comes across from everything that you've been talking about is that attitude of not giving in to the cancer and not just accepting that it's going to beat you, but learning to live with it,
Yep.
but also having that resolve and that fortitude to say, no, I'm going to carry on living for as long as I possibly can. Absolutely. And I think that mental attitude that you have, and also the physical fitness that you have has really been testament to how you've been able to beat it twice and hopefully a third time.
Well, hopefully indeed. But thank you. I mean, from my point of view, really, at the end of the day, as I said to people, there's nothing special at all about me. I'm purely just an average bloke who happened to get cancer. But I decided not to let it define me and beat me. And so far, thank the Lord, it's worked.
Yeah. So I've just got one more question for you now, which, as you know, this podcast is called Your Tagline Here. So we get all of our guests to come up with the tagline for the episode. Now, I know what your tagline is going to be, but I'm going to ask you anyway, what is your tagline for the episode?
Oh, thanks for asking me something.
Or you might surprise me and you might come up with something else.
Well, the obvious answer would be, obviously, whatever tagline is, never give up, never give in. Yeah. Obviously, that's my sort of carte blanche reply. But I think the other maybe sort of off the cuff tagline would be, why let yourself be a victim? Why let yourself be a victim? Why can't you beat the odds? Other people do.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be somebody else. It can be you. You've just got to believe in that and you've got to live that. And I think if one person can take that motto on board and make a success of it and enjoy a rich, fulfilled and a happy life. And as I said before, slight adjustment, and forgive me for going on a slight tangent, but the things I've experienced since I got cancer and the people I've met and all the wonderful things that have happened far outweigh the humdrum, mundane life I led before, which is all about businesses making money and about having material possessions. That disintegrates overnight. And what really matters at the end of the day is who you are, what you do, what your footprint is, and if you make a better difference rather than a worse one.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Austin, for coming on and sharing your story. Thank you for being so open and honest about it. I'm sure that it's inspiring for me, but it will be inspiring for people who are watching or listening, whether they have cancer or whether they don't have cancer, because it is, a really good story about how your mental attitude can help to overcome adversity in your life.
Well, thank you, Simon. And I have to say also well done on you on doing these podcasts. I think they're really important, and each person's got a story to tell. And if we can all, learn from that, that's fantastic. But thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Okay.
Great.
Thanks, Austin. So that brings us to the end of this episode. Thanks again to Austin for coming in and sharing his story. If you liked this episode, then please do give us a like and subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss out on any future content. If you do have any questions that you have for Austin or for me, then you can send us an email to hello@yourtaglinehere.com. Next week, I'm going to be speaking to Donna Joseph, and she's going to be talking about how she found her biological family, and now she's moving to the Caribbean as a result. So I will see you there next time.